Welcome to another episode of Fight the Burnout. We have, as always, another special guest from Arizona. But before we get going into that, there's a couple things. First thing, take one thing away from this episode and start implementing it into your life. There's a ton of information out there these days, but too many people are looking for all the information and never taking action. So just take action on one thing today, and your life will be better for it moving forward. The next thing, as well as this episode, as at the moment, is sponsored by Create From Y and our Lean Into It motorcycle retreat running on the 20th of May out of Sedona, Arizona. So 7 days, full VIP, motorcycle hire, everything is covered. Just come, ride, recharge, and network with some amazing people and learn from me the specific tools so you don't need to just rely on motorcycling. You can recharge continuously. So without further ado, we have Matt Thomas today from Pinol County Sheriff's Office in Arizona. And hopefully I pronounced that right, because I got it so wrong so many times before we started recording. But he's going to talk to us about his very long career in the sheriff's office and his experiences with Burnout, and also a book that he's wrote, which I know nothing about. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that one. But Matt, without further ado, tell us a little bit about yourself and start off with, why did you join policing?
Well, it was either that or go to prison. So,
Hey, you picked a much better option.
no, quite frankly, I grew up in a pretty rough area, and a few of my friends are in prison. They got wrapped up in gangs and stuff, and that was my exposure to law enforcement as well. Because in a high crime area, you kind of get exposed to law enforcement. And my grandparents were World War II veterans, and I was always kind of drawn to some type of service. Like, I felt in my heart like I needed to serve in some capacity. And honestly, I was. As I got into high school, and you're trying to figure out who you are, I was teetering because I had family that were on the wrong side of the law, family that were on the right side of the law, and it could have gone either way for me. And luckily, um, my wife of coming up on 30 years ended up pregnant at 19. And it was time for me. And my mom told me, she sat me down and she said, you can do one of two things. You can run away from this situation, which is not the manly thing to do, or you can be a good person and a good man, and you can embrace this and get your rear in gear and start making a life. And so looking around, I thought, I got to get I got to get something that's steady. Government work was steady. Police work was where I was drawn. It was either this or the military. And at 20 years old, I got hired by Pinal County and been there since.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Now, tell us a little bit about your policing career. Love to have a brief overview of the things that you've done. I don't know, the commendations, if you want to talk about them, if there are any, the things that didn't go so well. But yeah, just a few different, like, the areas that you've gone into and the things that you've done, and like a highlight reel as such.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And it's, you're going to completely understand how ADD I am when you hear all the things I've done, because about every 2 or 3 years, I would get the itch to move to something else, because I was like, all right, I got to do something else.
Yep.
But I started in the jail, working in detention, and that was just about a year. And then I went out to what we call going out to the road, became a deputy sheriff. And my first assignment was patrol, like most everybody else. So I worked patrol and did that for a few years, and decided I wanted to move into some specialty units. So I did traffic, which was fatal accidents, speed details, DUI, that kind of stuff. And while in traffic, I got exposed to drug interdiction as well, because we would work with the drug interdictors, and like, I got hooked there. I was hooked on the drug interdiction stuff and the gangs. So moving forward, I got recruited into undercover work, and so I worked undercover for a short stint as a detective, promoted out of that, and went back to patrol as a patrol sergeant. And then moving forward as a sergeant, I spent almost 9 years as a sergeant. That was patrol, that was training, the academy, Then I went back to Narcs as the undercover sergeant, and then back into traffic. And when I went back into traffic, I stood up our first motor unit for our agency. And so I became a motor as well, and promoted from that to lieutenant. Went back to the undercover work, the anti-smuggling. And during all of that time, from about 1997 on, I was part of our SWAT team as well, but they're a collateral duty team. So I did SWAT for about 18 years of the 29 that I've been on the force.
Wow, that's a career. So lots of changing around. Before we go further, what would you, because I'm sure there's going to be some things around burnout there and the ways that you got around it and the things that you learned from it. But first off, what would your definition of burnout be for you? Because I know there's the Webster Dictionary, which is around, continual stress and fatigue, both physically, mentally. And I just botched that. It's not exactly those words, but it's around that similar thing. But everybody kind of has their own experience with it and their own thinking around, like, when they've kind of been burned out, whether it be minor or be major. What would your definition of burnout be for yourself?
Oh man, I think for me, burnout. I don't even know if I can give it a definition, but more of a feel.
Mm.
It just felt like I was spinning my wheels and going nowhere. That I was stuck in a rut. That I hated everything and everybody. So it was all those combined, and sometimes one would outweigh the other, right? Sometimes I just really felt like I'm not going anywhere, I'm not doing anything, I'm not having fun, and then other times it would just weigh real heavy on you, where you're alienating friends and family and all that stuff because you think everybody's an asshole, and then all of a sudden you figure out like, oh shit, it's me, I'm the asshole.
I'm glad you said that because it is so true, isn't it? We're like, oh, everybody's an asshole. Everybody's out to get us. Oh, wait a second. I'm the asshole and I'm out to get everybody. Wait,
Yeah,
wait,
exactly.
actually, hold on. What do I need to do about that? So I know we'll talk about that. So Matt, throughout your career, obviously, when would you say your earliest feeling of that burnout kind of started?
Oh, it was probably as a sergeant, and it would have been around the 2002, 2003 era. Um, and I had 2001 was a rough year. I My wife and I lost a baby at birth, and that was a major life event. One of the guys at work that I had FTO'd, I knew his family real well. I still am, good friends with his dad. Was shot and killed at our agency, and then so add to that. So May, my buddy shot and killed. August, I lose a baby. September 11th happens in September. And so 2001 was just one of those years that just kept kicking you every time, you tried to get up. And so coming out of that uh, into 02, 03, and probably 04, um, just like what I was describing started happening, right? Alienating people, isolating yourself, and just not understanding why you can't get along with people, why you don't want to be around people, why you hate everybody, why somebody switching a lane in front of you makes you want to rip them out of a car and snap their neck, all that kind of stuff that goes along with the burnout. That's where I really saw it. And you know, I think it was at that point too that without even realizing what I was trying to do, uh, became, I don't want to say suicidal because I didn't want to kill myself, but I started taking more and more risks, and I would do just more and more crazy shit because I didn't care if I got killed, and actually I was probably looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And so I looking back, that's definitely a point where I was on edge and really burned out.
No, I can definitely relate to that feeling of I'll just do some crazy shit, and if it happens, it happens. I ride
Yeah.
motorcycles, man. It's at the time when I was going through my burnout back in about 2014, it kind of started. And then 2015 it was real bad. 2016 real bad. I literally pushed my motorcycle into corners faster than I was capable of. Just
Yep.
yeah, and then have that oh shit moment afterwards. But yeah, it's a scary time, isn't it? It's scary sitting in that situation.
It is.
Looking
It's
back.
when you're in it. Yeah, when you're in it, you're in the eye of the storm. But when you come out of it and you realize, man, had I been successful, how much you would have lost and how much pain you would actually cause. Yeah, it's scary.
Especially being officers, because we see regularly what that,
Right.
so, that actual follow through ends up causing as a flow on effect. Was it you, or was it somebody else that helped you identify that you were sitting in that first time?
Oh man, I can't attribute myself. I don't think. I think it was my wife. Like I said, she's a wife of almost 30 years now. So we've been through our fair share of ups and downs and life's tragedies and life's successes and wins. Um, and I think it was her that it was a combo of her basically saying, "You're the asshole." And you have alienated your family, and having a very honest discussion with me, and then not only her telling me that, but her letting me know how my kids felt about me,
Mm,
and that they viewed me the same way, which was, I mean, that cuts to your core when you hear things like your children are afraid of you because you go into such rage sometimes, and it's so crazy because you tell yourself, I'm doing everything for you guys, but then you turn around and you treat them horribly. And my wife would always tell me, when she would try to put me in check, she would say, don't treat us like a suspect. And that would be her cue to me that I'm being a complete asshole, towards them. And it's hard to get yourself out of that mode. So when I would be in those dark spots with the family, you just go cop mode on them, and you start treating them like the worst suspect that you're dealing with.
yeah. How many? Can you remember how many times it took for her having that conversation with you for it to actually click?
Uh, no, I don't. I think when we were on the verge of divorce, we had separated. I had moved out, um, and we were really struggling in our marriage. And I think it was during that time. Actually, it was when we sat down, because we were still being nice to each other. We weren't hateful towards each other or anything. And it was when we sat down to discuss who's going to get what and splitting everything up and all that. And you start going through things and you start going through your history. You're like, man, or I was, anyways. I was like, how the hell did we get to this point? Like, because
Mm,
when you start looking at your history and you're like, we were really good. Like, how did we get here? And then when you start talking about it reasonably, you figure out that I know how we got here. Like, I was pushing the wagon this way, and this is how we got here. And so it was those conversations that helped me realize two things: that a lot of it had been me, and that I didn't I didn't want what was coming. I
mm.
I wanted my family. I wanted my wife. I didn't want to be by myself. I didn't want to go through the whole find someone new and go through all that crap again. I was happy with my family. I just wasn't happy with myself, and it was taking an effect on my family and all the relationships.
It's amazing that, like, I've talked to lots of people. I'm very similar situation to you, except for I didn't get to the stage where we were talking about what each person would get. I almost cheated on my wife and then came home and was like, I'm done. I want a divorce. And she turned to me at that point, go to counseling with me. And she's asked me a few times, why did you say yes to counseling again? The first couple of times I put my hand up and asked for it after a lot of kicking and screaming in my own part. Uh, I'll be honest. But it's that whole thing of, we do this. And it's funny. I see a lot of my story and yours, and this is why I'm talking about it, is I joined the police because I wanted that secure job. I wanted to be with my now wife, not because she got pregnant or anything along those lines, but just because, I wanted to be with her. I didn't want to go off and sail around the world and come back for short times. And when she said, come to counseling one more time, I was like, I don't give up in the fight, which I think makes us extremely great cops. But at the same time, it can be, it can be detrimental at the same time. But with our relationships, is that it's interesting, isn't it? When we get thrown that family or job, or family or the path that we're on, if we're honest with ourselves, we can actually kind of shift and change that. What would be from that interaction, back then, have you had any bouts of burnout since within your law enforcement career? And we'll get into some of the fun stuff that you've done as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Again, I was a sergeant then, and then I got into, I became later on in my sergeant tenure, like towards the end of my being a sergeant, and as I promoted into a lieutenant, I was definitely burned out again. But this time, it it wasn't career burnout; it was burnout from my administration at the time.
Yeah.
I was not aligned on ideals with them. I was not aligned with how they treated people. None of that stuff. I felt that this was my agency. I had been here since I was 20 years old. I felt they were just using the agency as a stepping stone for other things to, go up the ladder, go on to other jobs, whatever. And that they were disingenuine um, in their reasoning for doing things, that it was more self-serving. And I've never agreed with that. I've always been one of those guys that sticks up for the small dude, and that fights for those that are being bullied and stuff like that. And so I got burned out because they have control over your life, and it's very easy to become hateful again because you feel like you go to work to fight evil, and then you end up fighting your own people more than you're fighting bad guys. And you're like, what in the fuck is going on? Like, why is this a thing? Why are my own trying to eat me? They should be the ones backing me, right? And the crazy thing is, some of these people that you work with that act like that, you would absolutely take a bullet for them, but outside of that, like outside of work, I wouldn't want to be around them. I wouldn't want to talk to them. I wouldn't want to associate with them. Um, and so it's a really weird phenomenon, and I think it's us in the military where you absolutely despise the person that's wearing the uniform next to you because of how they are, but you would still die for them. So it's just a weird
Yeah. Your
phenomenon, and I
values
think
don't
that
line
that
up,
just
but
screws up.
your values don't line up, but at heart, you still are like, I'll still die for you because that's just what we like. It's what we do, and it's who we are because we're here to protect and give everything for others. Between the two burnouts that are there, and was there any further ones along after lieutenant? And that, have you had any since then?
I think, honestly, I think I'm in a little bit of a rut right now, and I don't think I'm burned out, but I feel tired. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? And I get worn down, and it's your own people a lot of times that wear you
Yeah.
down because as in the role that I'm in now, I'm second in command of our agency, so I answer directly to the sheriff. He's the head of the agency. I'm in charge of all operations, all personnel, and I know how I feel about my people. I absolutely love my people. I care for them deeply. I want to see everybody do great things. Um, but you get people that are just hateful, people that are never happy in what you're doing, or they always try to claim that you have some ulterior motive in the decisions that you make. And so that all wears on you, and it becomes, what people don't realize is there's a thing called cumulative stress, right? So if you have that constant cumulative stress, that can burn you out. And so you get to points where you really are, there's days where I'm just looking around and I have people bitching at me, griping at me. I'm not doing what I should be doing, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, fuck all of you, because I am working my ass off. My family has paid the price for over 3 decades for all the work that I've done. I continue to pour into the agency, to pour into the county, to pour into the people. And there's those days where you want to fight all your own people because you're
Yep.
like, how dare do that? And I know that goes through all ranks and all
Yep.
levels. It happens like that. And so I don't think I'm in burnout because I have much better coping mechanisms now. And,
Yeah.
quite frankly, the minute that I actually listened to a good friend and started seeing a counselor, that helped a lot, because what I didn't realize is, as I got later on in my career and the stress started manifesting into physical stuff like heart palpitations, anxiety, panic attacks, all the stuff that as a dude, there is no way that I ever thought I would be saying that I have experienced those things, because you don't say that, A, and B, we're dudes, we're tough, we
Yeah.
we fight through that stuff.
And your alpha
But
personality as a cop.
yeah, absolutely. But when your body has a physiological reaction that you have zero control over,
Mm.
and you're like, what the fuck? And then you sit down with a professional and they're like, okay, well, here's what's going on. It's essentially it's stress, and it's all the trauma that you faced. And trauma is different for everybody, right? So you can't say, like, I can't minimize somebody else's trauma and compare it to my trauma. I can say, hey, I've been in some gunfights. I've seen, broken bones, people smashed, picked up brains. I've done all that stuff, and that's all my trauma. And some of it has affected me negatively, and some of it hasn't. Somebody else might have never seen any of that stuff, but whatever they faced as their trauma can cause them the exact same issues. And so, it's just this thing is so weird and has so much control.
It so does. It so does. And that's why we do the podcast, is because, and I love the fact, Matt, that you're so open, and you can tell you're so open because you've done so much work, throughout your 30-year career on yourself. And you've had some challenging times, like you've talked about already with us. What would you say between the two times and even now, what would you say the key things are well, we kind of know what's caused it, but the key things that have caused you to be able to um, come out of it, and come out of it, with those extra coping mechanisms? What would be like 2 to 3 of those key things that you think are there?
Well, so I would say one key component, like I already mentioned, was the counseling, seeing a professional to
Mm.
break down what is actually going on with you and talk through where your issues are, and you know because I think they make you feel more normal about it, if that
Mm.
makes sense. They kind of let you know, like, hey, you're not crazy, this is a thing, and it happens to human beings, and so you're a human being. And so they kind of normalize it, they break it down for you, and they make you understand, like, okay, it's not, I'm not going crazy. And they give you some coping mechanisms. I would say that's one of the things. The other thing is um, looking at the world different,
Mm.
and treating people differently, and being more, I guess, more forgiving, more accepting of others' personalities, others' fights, where they're at. And I think once you've come through this and you're on the back end of it, it's even easier, because you can be like, oh, I know where you're at. Like, I can see it. I was you, 10 years ago. So I think that's another thing, is having gone through it, you recognize. But I'm going to tell you, the number one thing is faith. When I went back to church
Yeah.
and I engaged my faith, that was the number one game changer for me. And what's funny is, you always hear it, it's very cliche, like you're always trying to fill this void with something, right? And people fill it with sex, drugs, gambling, whatever. Same thing, I was filling it with danger, and all this other crap. And when I got back to faith, it realigned everything for me. And
Mm.
so that was the biggest piece.
Why do you believe faith did that for you? I know not everybody, like, I'm not a religious guy or anything, and so
Right.
but why do you believe that faith did it for you, so that people can understand that side?
I think the biggest piece was just understanding that a you're not in control, that there is a higher power, that there is and for me, I'm a predetermined path kind of guy, like, that my life has already been planned out, my expiration date is already on me as soon as I was born. And so letting go a lot of of the small worry stuff where, I worry about people, what people think about you, worry about this, stop worrying about all that. And so when I got back to faith, I think that was the biggest thing, was letting go of stuff. I actually, within the first year of getting back to church, I went around and there was guys that I had not got along with in my career. We had, sabotaged each other because you don't like each other, all that kind of shit. And I went back to 2 or 3 different people and sat them down, and I apologized for everything I had ever done to them that was not cool. And told them that, I don't hold any grudges for everything they had done to me, and that I would just like to move forward, and started treating people differently, and started treating them moving forward, started treating everybody like that. So if I would get wronged, instead of taking it personally and reacting emotionally, I would just say, okay, I know why you're doing this, right? There's obviously an issue. And I tell my staff this all the time as we're developing leaders. I tell them that your position as a leader demands you to drop the emotions. And I know it's hard to do, but you have to drop the emotions, because you can't be emotional in your decision making when you're dealing with people's lives. And that you also have to understand that when you drop the emotion and you just talk rationally to people or deal with people rationally, that you have to be very forgiving, and you have to understand that they may be yelling at me, bitching at me, but I'm not really the target. It's something else going on in their life that is causing that reaction. And so a lot of times, even as we deal with discipline, the sheriff and I, one of our first questions is, somebody screws up and we're asking our leadership, have you checked into what's going on with them personally? Because we know that has a direct effect on everything. And has anybody noticed behavior changes in this person leading up to this event? Because that's the first thing we want to know, because that has a huge effect on where we're going to go from there.
Also, the flip side as well, the things happening at work then have an effect at home, which then affects work, and it becomes this tumbleweed, this snowball effect, and it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. I have a question for you, because you just had 3 great things in there. How are you using those for the state that you're currently sitting in with at work, with that kind of draining feeling that you're getting?
Oh man, I think faith is my biggest one still, because and why is because of the connections I've made through that realm. My men's group at church, the friends that I have that are not law enforcement, like they're outside of this little club, and just talking to them, because the thing you quickly realize when men start actually talking to one another instead of acting, peacocking and acting like we all have to not have problems. When you start talking to each other, it's crazy, because it doesn't matter what profession you're in. We all face stress. We all have family issues. We all have crazy stuff happening in our lives. And just being able, so again, drawing back to faith, because that has made those connections that I can now lean on and just have these discussions without feeling judged, because I'm telling them stuff and they're telling me stuff, and we're just having good discussions over a campfire and beer sometimes, and just talking through, man. And I think it's energizing. And this is going to sound kind of weird, because you're getting energized off of negativity, but it's energizing to hear other people's problems sometimes, because it normalizes it for you. And it also lets you understand that it's not just you. Like, the back to that, you're not crazy, right? It's not just you, it's everybody. Everybody faces it. Everybody just handles it differently.
Especially when it's people that aren't in the same industry or career as you. You're like,
Yes.
wait a second, you're not a cop and you're still having the same issues as I. Oh, okay, cool. It's not just
Right.
us. It's not just us.
Right.
Okay, cool. I can kind of
Yeah.
that's okay. Or you go down the track of, if you're too far gone, you go down the track of, oh, this whole world is fucked.
Yeah.
And hopefully you're not there. If you're there, you definitely need to go back to number 1 that Matt said, the
Yeah.
counselor.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's it. You're spot on with those. I believe in a purpose, having a purpose and a driving purpose of your life, of who you are. A lot of people, it sounds like you're getting a lot of that from faith, and it gets you to interpret and shift the way that you look at the world, the people around you, your clientele, I mean, your clientele now is probably more the you know, the officers and the troops.
Right.
But as an officer, your clientele is the bottom 2 to 10% of society all the time. And guess
Right.
what? The world is not just all that way. And
Yeah.
by having that purpose and attaching that to what you do, you're constantly being fulfilled, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And you made an important point that, especially for cops listening to this, it's important for them to understand there is a point in your career, and mine was about, if I can pinpoint it, it was right about the 7 year mark, 5 to 7 year mark. There was a point in my career where everybody was an asshole. Everybody was a bad guy. Everybody was an asshole. They all needed to go to jail. I don't care what you did. If you broke the law, go to jail. I don't care about the circumstances. And if you are at a point where you're feeling that way, you're always on edge, you're always hyper vigilant because everybody's an asshole that needs to go to jail, you're burned out. And you that's when you need to get help, because here's the truth, is what you said. We're dealing with like 2% of the population. The problem is you get so myopic that you're focusing on that 2% and it looks like 100% of the world. And then you start treating good people that way. And that's where cops get in trouble, is when we deal with normal members of society who have just made a mistake, but we treat them like the worst criminal asshole we've ever met in our career. They get a very bad taste in their mouth for law enforcement. And that's one of the biggest changes I've made in how I deal with people, because I was that guy. Like I didn't give a shit who you were, what your background was, any of that stuff. You broke the law, you're going to jail, bottom line, boom, done. And now, I'll hang out with guys that are career felons but have changed their life and have become different people. I would have never done that before, ever. Like, that was way out of my realm. But now I have no issue with that because I look at people as people.
I think you've hit a massive point there, and it's something that, when you tie into that purpose, when you tie into yourself, and you actually know who you are, you can then turn up to people in a different way. Whereas from what I've seen, a lot of us law enforcement, we come into it not knowing who we are in the beginning. And when you don't know who you are in the beginning, then you just try and become that image of whatever it is. I see, if you're watching this video, I don't know if that's you in tack gear on the poster behind you. If that's you in tack gear, a new cop is going, maybe they're inspired by the tech kind of side of the job, and they're like, that's me. I need to be that person. And they have this image of who they have to become to be that. And all of a
Right.
sudden you lose yourself. And when you lose yourself, that it spirals that burnout so much faster,
Oh, yeah.
because you're actually internally fighting against yourself, because you're like, oh
Right.
no, I need to be this staunch person who hates everybody, who, because maybe you saw a cop that was that way. Maybe you saw a movie that a cop was that way. And you're like, yeah, that's how you get stuff done. But when you identify and you touch in, which it sounds like you now have, Matt, you touch into actually who you are and you bring that person to the job. All
Yeah.
of a sudden it changes everything. It changes the way that you
Oh, yeah.
respond to the trauma. It changes the way that you respond to that criminal. Changes the way that you respond to that person who just beat the shit out of a kid,
Yep.
because you come from a place of yourself, not a place of the image of who you, or the mask, as I like
Right.
to call it,
Right.
that mask that you're bringing to the job. Now, there's times where you need that mask because you need to kind of step those emotions off. But
Yep.
knowing who you are means that you can come back and you can take that mask off, and that stuff doesn't
Right.
hit you
Right.
as hard.
Well, and that's like, I have a good friend that teaches combatives, and it's a lot like that in combatives, right? We're protectors, and a lot of times we look a lot like bad guys in our behavior, but we have the morality piece as protectors, or we should. And so sometimes you have to get violent in this job, and I'm not against that, because there's violent people out there, and we need to address them with the same. But we have the morality. So we get to a point where we have either proven our point, or we have, stopped the threat. And then morality kicks in for us because we're not criminals and thugs. And then we go back to being a person. And so you do have to, and that's the part that's tough, is the flipping the switch on and off. And sometimes the switch breaks and you just, you're in it all the time.
And that's where knowing who you are, and I'm a huge advocate for, knowing your why, knowing your purpose, knowing who you are, because then you have that foundation. When you've built that
Right.
habit of reminding yourself who it is, you can switch back. That switch is less likely to break because, like you said, we have to. And I talk a lot about, on my social media, on different things. I talk a lot about the alter ego. Who do you need
Mm.
to become to win? Because there are going to be times where you need to become something different
Oh yeah,
to,
yeah,
to win,
absolutely.
especially in those fights and those situations where they're
Yeah,
honestly trying to kill you. And if
right,
somebody's trying to kill, I've never been in a gunfight, thank God. But as it sounds like you have, that person's trying to kill you. So you
right.
have to step up that game. You have to become that version of yourself, or the version of whatever you need to win. But then it
Yep.
comes down to, then you switch yourself back on instead of taking that 100, that 10th, 12th, whatever kind of shot into somebody, or that third, or whatever it kind of is, is that excess. Because it is that morality. We're here to protect people and protect ourselves, at the same time. Matt, what would you say your why and purpose is? I've uncovered a process that, and figured out it stems back to our childhood normally, our why
Mhm.
and purpose, to some events back in there. We won't go into that, but it's part of kind of what I do. Uh, and it kind of has helped us through our childhood, through our teens, through our 20s, 30s, and our careers, helped us, really hone in when we're in that, that fire stage where we're just, feel excited, we're lit up. It's because we're meeting that. What would you say
Right.
yours possibly is, with where you're sitting at the moment,
Oh man, this is a deep question. This is a much deeper question than people understand,
Mm,
because there's so many facades. And so I would say, if I'm being 100% honest and getting digging down to my core, I would say it's the honor of my family's name, right?
mm,
And that I had a very tough grandpa growing up. He was my father figure. He was just a hardcore old Texan, World War II vet, and I wanted nothing more than to make him proud. And he always instilled in me that your name is all you have. And so I think honoring that and making sure that everybody, when I say my name, they're like, no, that dude, that's a good dude, and he's a good cop. And so that has always driven me. And I think that the second driving factor to that is when people discount me. So I have that as the driving factor, that I want to have a good name in this business and in this world as both a good man and a good cop. And when people tell me I can't do something, I'm like, watch this motherfucker.
mm. Well, if we ever, if when I'm over in Phoenix, if we meet up, I have a feeling we're gonna have a lot of fun because we have a lot of similarities. It's like, my thing for a long time was, you say I can't do it, and my wife says still to this day, don't dare Chris to do something, because like,
Right.
as long as it's not gonna kill him or hurt somebody, he'll probably figure out a way to do it. And
Yep.
my thing used to be always be, oh yeah, okay, cool, hold my beer. I'll
Yep.
be right back.
Exactly. Yep.
No, I love that, man. I love that whole, the honoring the name. You've obviously had a lot of thought about this, and you can see it through our interview today. You talked about, your grandparents and the World War II, being World War II vets, and how that kind of drove you into the policing and that side of stuff. So it's you can
Right.
definitely see how it's been in there, on stuff. As we wrap up, um, tell me a little bit about the book. I want to know about the book and
Oh,
kind of where that
yeah.
stemmed from, and what
So
it's about.
this thing behind me is not like, it's not a like, hey, I'm a cool guy.
Are you
It's
sure?
really
Are you
weird.
sure, with your
No, no.
sunglasses and your tack vest and your
I
your
know, dude. I
torch, your
know.
flashlight?
But this is actually the cover of my book. So the book is called Interceptors, the Untold Fight Against the Mexican Cartel, and so what the book consists of, start to finish. I'll give you a quick breakdown. The start basically goes through my history as a kid, growing up in a rough neighborhood, all pretty much all Mexican gang area, controlled by them. And then moving into my teens, into high school, my mom moved me away from that because there was a lot of trouble going on. We moved out to a rural area, and I continued to be just immersed in the Mexican culture. I in high school, it was a heavy Hispanic influence, Mexican influence. I worked the summers in the fields. I worked in the potato fields, working on a potato digger with immigrants. And so I tell all of that because I want people to have an understanding of my background and how I grew up. So when I'm talking about the Mexican culture as a white guy, they understand why I know what I know. And then I go from there into my law enforcement career, and I just kind of touch on how the law enforcement career started and how I got into this work. And then I go into the cartels themselves that we deal with here. And we mainly deal with the Sinaloa cartel in Arizona, but we have a little bit of,
That must be fun at the
influence from all
moment.
the other ones. Yeah, yeah, it's never fun, but yeah.
Especially with
Um,
everything going on in Mexico at the moment.
oh, dude, yeah, it's a hot mess. The whole thing's a hot mess. But then I go into the structure of the cartel a little bit, how they're structured as we fight them. I go into the narco culture because they have their own culture, really, and they have their own belief system. They have somewhat of their own religion. So I go into some of that. And then I go into some of the operations we did, which were counter narcotic, counter cartel operations in the southwest portion of our county out in the open desert. And the operations themselves are what usually gets people most stoked because they don't know that most of this stuff is going on unless they're in the business and in this particular part of the business.
No, that's awesome, man. I'm intrigued on it. Sounds like you could make a movie or a TV show on it as well. Um,
Yeah, that'd be cool.
it sounds like, yeah, it sounds very interesting. It sounds like some of the TV shows that I've watched already.
Right.
So if somebody wants to, what's the overall? I'm an outcome driven guy. What's the overall outcome message or that from the book that you're delivering through it?
So the biggest message is at the back end of that, where I tell people essentially it takes a village, right? So all the problems that come along with drugs, cartels, all that stuff. We're a consumer nation in the U.S., right? And so it's all being pushed for a reason. And what I kind of relay to people is there's two things: a, to honor the men and women that are doing this job every day, and all the so when they read the book and they're like, "Oh my God, you guys are doing some crazy stuff." Yeah, they do it every day. Like there's cops out there doing this stuff every day, and you should honor the work that they do because it is some of the best work on the planet, and you don't have the life you have without it. So that's one. And then to also get them to understand that we can't do it by ourselves. It takes the whole community. And I tell people all the time, especially in this position, the true definition of community policing is when the community is doing the policing, and we just have to show up to take care of the very serious stuff. So those are the two messages: is community, like get involved and back your cops and honor what they do.
Oh, I love that. I love that, man. How does somebody get a copy of it?
Two ways they can. The easiest way is to go to my website. I've got a website where I have it. I have links to the books, and it's also available on the like Kindle, Amazon, Apple Books. But if they go to onetimenation.com, they can see a little bit about my background, and they can link up to the book there as well.
Perfect. I'll drop that website in the description down below this as well, so people can go have a look at it. And what would be your top tip currently? Maybe 1 to 2 tips to help an aspiring or future police officer. Actually, no, let me rephrase that question. Sorry. My mind went somewhere different.
All good.
What would you love to tell yourself 30 years ago?
Don't be an asshole.
To help prevent some of the things that happen. Obviously,
Yeah.
we don't we learn through our mistakes,
Right.
and otherwise they become a mistake if you don't learn from them. But to better advance yourself fast, like quicker, so you didn't maybe you could have jumped ahead to where you are now sooner by not having to go through all those troubles or struggles or challenges. What would you have loved to have taught yourself back on day one?
Probably the what we talked about already is to not get caught up in the persona, the facade of this job, right? Of the image, or just to be the person you are, stay grounded and stay grounded to what's actually important to you. Because I think we get wrapped up in this job in thinking the job is everything and that the job is going to carry you through everything. And what I've figured out, especially now that I'm at the back end of my career, is that the job really doesn't give a shit about you. The family, your family, your loved ones, they care about you. And what ends up happening is you go all in on this job. And this could have been me very easily, if not by the grace of God. You go all in on the job and you push everybody out of your way to do that. And then you get to the end of the job. And I think this is why a lot of us eat our gun, to be quite honest. You get to the end of this and you have pushed away everything you actually love. And this job just kicks you to the curb and keeps going forward.
Yeah. So true. So true is, that identity crisis that so many have when they go to leave or they think about leaving. It's like, well, what else or who am I without it? Dead
Right.
true there, Matt.
Especially if you push who
Yeah.
you actually wanted to be away from it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I would say that was, to answer your question, it would be to not fall into that trap.
I love it. Last question I always ask. What is your top tip to self-happiness?
Top tip to self-happiness is just have fun and just enjoy life. Like I think we fall into another trap of taking everything so serious, and everybody feels like they have to have some title and they have to be this or that, and you have to be serious. And I'm known as a jokester, and I be honest with you, man, I don't fit in with people at my rank because of that. Like, I don't give a shit about your title. I don't give a shit about all the PhDs or whatever you have on your wall. Like, none of that means anything to me. Are you a good person? Do you treat people good? And do you have fun? That's really all that matters.
Yeah, dead right. I love it. I love it. There you go. You heard it from Matt. Just have fun. It doesn't matter what rank you're at. Just have fun. Awesome,
Right.
Matt. Any last words before we wrap up?
Well, all I would really say is no matter what your profession is, that you got to have fun. You got to be a decent human being. That's the only way our world is going to move forward in a good way.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you, Matt, for being here, for taking the time out of your day. Look forward to having a skim through the book. I'm not I'll do my best to read it, but I'm not going to make any promises.
It's all good.
I
all
just
good, brother.
I don't read books. I think I've read like a dozen books in my entire life. But I listen to audiobooks from time to time when I'm riding my motorcycle.
Yeah.
So I'll put it on the list. But for those out there, make sure you do get a copy of it. And you'll find that link in the description. And yeah, thanks, Matt, for all you're doing. Thanks for your 30 years of service and what you're doing now for the troops and helping them out. I look forward to hopefully maybe seeing you when I'm in Phoenix and having a beer or just a catch up. And for everybody out there that's listening, like I said at the very beginning of this episode, take one thing and run with it. Whether it be, just have fun, whether it be go to a counselor, maybe it be just taking a self-check moment. Just take one thing, run with it. And once you get that ingrained into habit, then come back and grab another one. We do multiple episodes. We do these episodes so that you can learn from other people's experiences. It's not because we're better than you. It's not because we know more. It's because we're just willing to talk about it. And if you're willing to talk about it, hit me up as well. And we'll get you on the show. But otherwise, if you are struggling, you are having any challenges, just go to createfromwhy.com. You can find out more information on how you can work with me. And if you can't work with me because of some reason, we'll find you somebody that you can. We want to make this profession and world a better place. And that's the way we do it. Till next time, thank you very much. Make sure you like, subscribe, and send this out to somebody and share it so that, they can get a little bit of information. Till next time, train hard, test easy. We love you all.